If you ever find yourself lost in the Moroccan desert, remember this: the silence there doesn't forgive. That's what I thought as I stood on the scorching sand near Merzouga, watching my daughter and her husband drive away, laughing. They left me stranded under a merciless sun, their laughter fading into the wind like something unholy. They didn't know I wasn't just some aging widow on a sentimental trip. I was the heir to a Urbek Basher's million fortune, a fortune they'd just thrown away in one single act of greed. But let's go back. 3 months earlier, I was still living quietly in Minnesota, mourning the loss of my husband, Harold, who died of a heart attack at 68. We'd been married 40 years. Harold was the kind of man who turned pennies into empires, meticulous, disciplined, obsessed with protecting what he built. When he passed, I thought grief would be my greatest test. I was wrong. Our only child, Claire, had always kept her distance, phone calls on birthdays, short visits on holidays, and always the same phrase, "Mom, could you help me out a little this month?" The amounts she asked for grew each time: rent, credit cards, then business investments. I wanted to believe she was struggling, not scheming. Then she showed up at Harold's funeral with her new husband, Damien Roth, a smooth-talking entrepreneur who had charm polished to a mirror's shine. He was older, 35 to Claire's 23, and the kind of man who looked you in the eye just long enough to make you trust him before stealing the silver from your table. Still, grief makes fools of even the cautious. Damien suggested a family healing trip, a chance to honor Harold's dream of visiting the desert landscapes he'd always loved. It almost felt like fate. Mises, Whitmore, Damien had said, using that overly respectful tone that hid contempt. Harold always wanted to see Morocco, didn't he? The dunes, the history, the markets. It could be beautiful closure for all of us. I remember Claire holding my hand, eyes shining with tears she probably practiced in the mirror. "It'll be good for us, Mom, for all of us." And so I agreed. The first few days were everything they promised. Marrakech was a swirl of color and sound, the kind of place Harold would have adored. Lanterns, spices, laughter. I felt young again. Damien played the perfect son-in-law, taking endless photos, telling me how much Harold's legacy meant to him. But small cracks were already showing. Claire kept bringing up Harold's will, asking if I'd ever modernized my estate. Damien kept nudging her in those conversations with that practiced half-smile. I told myself I was imagining it, paranoia born from loneliness. Then one night I overheard them whispering outside my hotel room. Words carried easily through those old walls. "Are you sure about this?" Claire asked, her voice trembling. "It's the only way, babe," Damien said. "She'll never share it willingly. You want your future or not?" That was the first time I felt the chill of something darker than greed, something planned. Still, I played the fool. 2 days later, they suggested a drive, just us three, off the beaten path, a little adventure before returning home. Mate. If only I'd known that road trip would become a test of who I truly was. When the engine stopped in the middle of nowhere, I thought it was just car trouble. I didn't realize it was a setup, and that my own daughter was about to watch me die. The road stretched endlessly ahead, a pale ribbon of dust and sun. No signs, no people, no sound but the engine's low hum and the whine of wind against metal. We'd left the last village an hour earlier, and the paved highway had melted into rough tracks of sand. The sky was so bright it hurt to look at. "Are you sure this is the way?" I asked, clutching my hat as the Jeep bounced over uneven ground. Damien flashed his easy grin in the rearview mirror. "Absolutely, Evelyn. There's a Berber village ahead, barely touched by tourists. You'll love it." Claire sat beside him, quiet, twisting her bracelet nervously. She hadn't said much since morning. My instincts told me something was wrong, but I'd ignored that voice once before, the day I married Harold against everyone's advice. Back then, listening to my gut had paid off. I should have done the same this time. We drove for what felt like forever. No villages appeared, no people, just sand and sky. Then the Jeep jerked and sputtered. "Damn," Damien muttered. "Might be overheating. Give me a second." He pulled over and stepped out, raising the hood dramatically. I heard him call out, "Evelyn, could you grab the small water bottle from the back? Need to cool the radiator." I unbuckled, reached behind the seat, and heard the sound that would echo in my mind for the rest of my life. The doors slamming shut. When I looked up, Damien was already behind the wheel again. Claire was in the passenger seat, head down, hands trembling. "Claire?" I called. "What's going on?" Damien's eyes met mine in the mirror. The grin was gone. His voice was cold, efficient. "It's nothing personal, Evelyn, but you've had your time. It's ours now." "Damien," Claire's voice broke. "Mom, please don't drive," he snapped. "Claire," I shouted, running forward as the tires spun in sand. "Claire, look at me." She did. For one fleeting second. I saw guilt, fear, and something worse, obedience. Then the Jeep lurched forward, spraying dust across my face. I stumbled, coughing as the vehicle shrank into the horizon. Within seconds, they were gone, just me, the desert, and the searing silence. I stood there, numb. The heat pressed down like a living thing. My hat had blown off. My throat was already dry. It hit me slowly. They weren't coming back. My daughter and her husband had just left me to die. For a moment, my mind refused to believe it. Maybe they were testing me, or I'd misunderstood. Maybe Damien had panicked and would turn around any second. But minutes turned into hours. The sun climbed higher. No sound, no shadow, no rescue. And then a strange calm settled over me. I could almost hear Harold's voice in my head, the same one that used to guide me through every financial decision, every crisis. "Evelyn, never panic. Panic clouds the strategy." Strategy, right. I checked what I had: a small crossbody bag, one half-full bottle of water, sunscreen, a silk scarf, and a pair of sunglasses. No phone. Damien had taken it earlier for directions. I walked to the spot where their tire tracks disappeared into the dunes. My first instinct was to follow, but then I remembered heat distorts distance. What looked close could be miles away. So I turned east, toward a faint ridge I'd noticed earlier. If there was elevation, there might be shelter. Maybe even life. The sun burned my neck, but I kept walking. I didn't cry. Not yet. The tears would have to wait until I'd earned the right to survive them. I thought the desert would kill me before the night did. But by dawn, I realized the real danger wasn't the heat. It was the thoughts that started whispering in my mind. The desert changes when the sun falls. It goes from a furnace to a freezer in minutes, and the silence becomes heavier, as if the earth itself is listening to your heartbeat. By nightfall, I had walked for what felt like an eternity. My throat ached, my feet throbbed, and my mind had stopped thinking in full sentences. Only one word pulsed through my head like a drumbeat: survive. When the last of the light faded, I found a small cluster of rocks that broke the wind. I crawled behind them and wrapped my scarf around my arms for warmth. The sand was cold, biting, and each gust of wind sounded like whispered laughter. Damien's laughter, Claire's. For the first few hours, I just sat there, staring at the horizon. Somewhere beyond it, my daughter was probably sipping wine and pretending to grieve. I almost laughed at the thought, a raw, humorless sound that startled even me. Then, from the darkness, Harold's voice seemed to whisper in my ear again. "You can't control what they do, Evelyn. You can only control what you do next." That snapped me back into focus. I had water, barely half a bottle, and a handful of crackers. That would last maybe 12 hours, if I was careful. I needed to move before sunrise, find shade, maybe stumble upon a road or a trail. The stars above were impossibly bright, unfamiliar constellations, sharp as glass. I remembered how my father had once taught me to navigate by the North Star, and for the first time that night, I felt something like hope. If I could find north, I could find civilization. I started walking again slowly, steadily. One step, one breath. By dawn, I found what looked like the crumbling ruins of an old structure. maybe a way station from decades ago. The walls were half buried in sand, but it offered shelter. I crawled inside, teeth chattering, despite the morning heat returning. Inside, it smelled of dust and decay, but it was safe. And there, in a corner, I saw something that almost made me cry. A tin can rusted but sealed. Inside, there were dates dry and shriveled, but edible. Someone long ago had left them behind, and fate had saved them for me. I ate a few and sipped my remaining water. Energy trickled back like a slow sunrise. I even managed to laugh, a tired, bitter laugh. If Damien and Claire thought I was too fragile to survive, they were about to learn that I'd spent 40 years managing crises bigger than this. Harold had once called me the calmest storm in the room. I intended to prove him right. By afternoon, I'd built a makeshift shade using my scarf and fragments of wood from the ruins. I rationed everything, every sip, every crumb, and as I rested, another thought crept into my mind, colder than the night wind. If I survived this, they would never see me as Evelyn Whitmore, the widow, again. They would see me as the reckoning they'd unleashed. I wasn't going to die here. I was going to rise here. The desert wasn't going to be my grave. It was going to be my rebirth. As the sun began to set again, I saw something in the distance, a faint shimmer, metal or glass-catching light. Maybe a vehicle, maybe a mirage. Either way, I smiled. Because now I had a plan. When I reached the source of that glimmer, I didn't find rescue. I found someone watching me. And his arrival changed everything. At first, I thought my mind was playing tricks on me. The shimmer I'd seen near the horizon flickered and moved like a mirage, shifting in and out of view as waves of heat distorted the air. But as I drew closer, the shape grew clearer. Not a car, not a building, but a small, tattered tent beside what looked like a motorcycle, half buried in sand. I hesitated. In the desert, you learn quickly that not every sign of life is salvation. But curiosity and desperation pushed me forward. When I was about 50 feet away, a voice called out in accented English. "Stop right there, madam." I froze. A man stepped out from behind the tent, tall and weathered, with skin darkened by the sun, and a scarf wrapped around his head. His clothes were worn but sturdy, the kind of fabric you only see on people who belong to the desert. He raised one hand, not threatening, just cautious. "Who are you?" "My name's Evelyn," I croaked, my voice raw. I was left here by my family." He studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Left? You mean abandoned?" I nodded. The words sounded heavy, but it was the truth. He muttered something in Arabic under his breath, a prayer, I think, then waved me closer. "Come, sit. You shouldn't be out here alone. You're lucky the wind changed today. Otherwise, no one would ever find you." I staggered toward the tent and nearly collapsed at the entrance. He caught me before I hit the sand and helped me inside. The small space was simple: a mat, a lantern, a few tin cups, and a goatskin pouch of water. He handed it to me. "Drink slowly," he said. "You drink too fast, your body will reject it." The water was lukewarm and tasted of earth, but to me, it was life itself. I sipped, tears pricking my eyes. "My name is Hakim. My name is Hakim," he said finally. "I am Berber. I travel between towns. Fix radios, trade supplies." "What were you doing here, Evelyn?" I told him everything, or at least most of it. I said my daughter and her husband had left me here after a fight, that I'd been lost for 2 days. I didn't mention the inheritance or the fortune. That could wait. Hakim listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. When I finished, he shook his head slowly. "To leave your own mother here," he said. "That's not human." His words broke something inside me. Not pain, not anger, just a quiet realization. Someone believed me. Over the next few hours, Hakim shared his food, bread hard as stone but filling, dried figs and bitter coffee boiled over a tiny flame. He showed me how to collect dew on fabric at night and how to tell direction, by reading wind patterns in the sand. I listened, learning fast. I wasn't going to be a victim waiting for rescue. If Hakim could live here, so could I, long enough to plan what came next. That night, as we sat under the stars, he looked at me with cautious curiosity. "You will go home soon?" "Oh, I'll go home," I said, my voice low and calm. "But not before I make sure the people who left me here never sleep peacefully again." Hakim studied me, then nodded as if he understood revenge too well. "Then you are stronger than they think." I smiled faintly. "They'll learn that soon enough." By the time Hakim and I reached the nearest road, I wasn't just alive, I was already plotting. And my first call from Morocco would change everything for Claire and Damien. 2 days later, the desert finally released me. Hakim and I rode his old motorcycle through miles of shifting sand until the dunes gave way to rocky plains. When I saw the outline of a small roadside cafe shimmering in the heat, I nearly cried. Civilization, noise, color, water, life. Hakim helped me off the bike, steadying me as my legs trembled. "You're safe now," he said, his tone gentle. Safe. The word felt strange, almost meaningless, because deep down I wasn't thinking about safety, I was thinking about payback. The cafe owner, a kindly woman in her 50s, ushered me inside. I washed my face, drank a glass of mint tea, and looked at my reflection in a cracked mirror. My skin was blistered and sunburnt, my lips split, my hair stiff with dust, but my eyes were sharp again, alive. Hakim had given me back more than water and food. He'd given me clarity. "Where will you go?" "Where?" he asked. "To Marrakesh," I said. "Then home." He nodded. "And the ones who left you?" I met his gaze. "They'll get what they earned." He didn't press further. "Some men don't need explanations when they recognize vengeance in someone's eyes." At a nearby table sat a French tourist using her phone. I asked politely if I could make a quick international call, my voice still hoarse, my hands trembling slightly. She handed me the device without hesitation. The first number I dialed was my attorney's office in Minneapolis. When he answered, I could hear the disbelief in his voice. "Mrs. Whitmore? My God, we thought you were missing." "I was," I said flatly. "Claire and Damien reported me lost in the desert. I need you to listen carefully." "Yes, of course, do not give them access to anything. No accounts, no properties, nothing. Freeze every asset connected to the family trust. I'll explain everything when I'm back in the States." There was a long silence. "You're saying they tried to kill me, James? They left me to die." A sharp inhale. "Understood. I'll take care of it immediately." My next call was to my bank. I activated every fraud alert Harold had set up for emergencies. My husband had been meticulous, a man who always prepared for the worst, and now even in death, he was protecting me. Finally, I dialed one last number, one I'd memorized since before cell phones existed. "Claire's," she answered after 2 rings. "Hello?" Her voice was soft, hesitant. She must have been expecting a call from someone else. "Schrohamste Freesbriesbu first Doorsemstun to fair." "Hi, sweetheart," I said, calm and cold. There was silence, a heartbeat, then a gasp. "Mom?" "That's right," I said. "Surprised?" "W for du sen, where are you? Or be dus tying ton risa Spain Maseri?" "We've been—" "Don't," I interrupted. "Don't you dare lie to me. I know what you did, Claire. I know you left me there." Mom, that's not," Damien said. "Oh, I'm sure Damien said many things. But tell me, honey, when you watched me standing there in that desert, begging you to stop, what did you say?" Her breath hitched. I could almost hear the guilt through the static. "I'll be home soon," I said, my voice lowering to a whisper. "And when I am, you and Damien will learn what it feels like to lose everything." Before she could respond, I ended the call. Hakim, who had been quietly sipping his tea, looked up at me. "That was them, yes, and now?" I smiled faintly. "Now the real journey begins." By the time I reached Marrakesh, the police already knew my story, but not the whole truth. Because justice wasn't enough for me anymore. I wanted ruin. Marrakesh felt like another world after the silence of the dunes. A riot of color, a maze of alleys, and the constant hum of life. It was easy to get lost there, but for the first time since Harold died, I felt in control of my fate. The city gave me anonymity and, more importantly, time to think. At the consulate, the officials were efficient and kind. They recorded my statement, wrote down the GPS coordinates from the rock I'd marked, and promised to hold Claire and Damien to account for abandoning me. The police took photographs of my sunburns and the rusted tin can from the ruins. To the authorities, it was a straightforward case of abandonment, straightforward and solvable. They wanted to move quickly. I agreed, but only on the surface. I could have pushed for immediate charges and let the courts take their course. I had every right to do that. I had evidence, testimony from Hakim, and the scribbled warning on the desert wall. But there's a difference between satisfying justice and savoring justice. I wanted the latter. I wanted the slow, articulate unweaving of the life they built on lies. So I put on a mask. I smiled at the investigator. I thanked the consulate staff. I acted small and frightened, the grieving widow who'd been saved by strangers. It was a role I could play well. Grief had taught me restraint, and it made people underestimate me. Underestimation is the most reliable weapon. While the consulate arranged my travel and medical checkups, I called James again and spoke in measured tones about paperwork and asset freezes. I arranged for forensic copies of family accounts to be prepared and sent to his office. I instructed him to share nothing with the press. Control the narrative, I told him. Let them think the law will handle it. Let them believe they'll be judged quietly. Back at the Riad that night, I watched the city breathe below a small balcony. Lantern light flickered across courtyard tiles, and the distant call to prayer stitched the air with something old and patient. I thought of Claire as she must be sleeping, or not sleeping, and of Damien pacing like a trapped animal. Ooh. They were in panic now. They didn't know the extent of what had been set in motion. That was my advantage. They were frantic and clumsy. I was patient and precise. I spent the next days setting traps that wore legal suits instead of shackles. I gave my attorney explicit instructions to lodge civil suits for elder abuse and attempted fraud. Civil claims move slowly but leave scars, liens, freezes, subpoenas that peel back every comforting layer of their lives. I hired investigators to compile Damien's history, his financial skeletons, and any pattern of deception. If he'd hurt other women, their stories would turn his charm into a headline. If Claire had lied on loan applications or misused accounts, the paper trail would be brutal. Yet alongside legal maneuvers, I cultivated an image anyone could recognize. The bruised mother who forgives because she is above vengeance. I returned a call to Claire once, voice soft and weary. "I forgive you," I told her, a lie packaged in warmth. Her sobs were immediate and soaked with relief. "Mom, I promise I'll make it right." Let them cling to that tiny reed of hope. Let them believe repentance will save them. The forgiving mother is a dangerous myth. It disarms and confuses. While they sobbed and pleaded, my investigators were unlocking accounts, tracing transfers, and quietly talking to prosecutors. Every tear they shed made their statements more urgent, more believable, and thus easier to undermine with the facts I would reveal when the time was right. I sipped mint tea on a rooftop and watched the sun set like spilled gold over Marrakesh. The plan wasn't cruelty for the sake of cruelty. It was an orchestration, a series of legal and social moves designed to strip them of illusion. Illusion, money, and ultimately the life they stole. They thought my forgiveness would soften me. Instead, it masked the last piece of the trap, a revelation so small, died, and precise. It would unravel everything Damien believed he'd built. The morning I boarded my flight back to Minneapolis, I wasn't the same woman who'd arrived in Morocco. The old Evelyn, grieving, hesitant, too trusting, had been buried somewhere beneath those dunes. The one walking onto that plane was colder, sharper, and far more dangerous. By the time I landed, the stage was already set. James, my attorney, had worked fast. Every financial door Claire and Damien could possibly touch was locked. The police had my recorded testimony, but they were holding off on formal charges, just as I'd instructed. I didn't want this to be over quickly. I wanted them to twist. When I arrived home, my house felt different. Too quiet, but also alive with potential. Harold's study still smelled faintly of tobacco and old books. And that's where I sat to make my first call. I didn't call the police. I didn't even call James. I called Damien. He answered on the second ring, his voice a strange mixture of surprise and fear. "Evelyn, you're alive?" I finished for him. "Yes, sorry to disappoint you." There was a pause, a sharp intake of breath. "Look, whatever you think happened, I know what happened. I cut in. You left me in the desert with half a bottle of water. I also know that you've been trying to access accounts that don't belong to you. And I know about your debts, Damien, Las Vegas, Monte Carlo, Dubai. Quite the list." Silence. Then a small, nervous laugh. "You've been busy. Oh, very. And here's the funny part. You've done all this for an inheritance you'll never touch." "What?" "Harold's will," I said. "It includes a clause that disinherits anyone who harms me or acts against my interests. You and Claire could have waited, could have lived comfortably for decades. Instead, you'll get nothing, not a cent." I could almost hear his composure cracking. "You're bluffing, am I?" I said, letting the question hang. "Thanks. Because the clause also says that if I die under suspicious circumstances, all assets go to charity, not family. So even if your plan had worked, Damien, you'd have killed me for money that was never yours." For a long moment, the line was dead silent. Then he said, low and venomous, "You think you've won? But this isn't over." "Oh, it's far from over," I said softly. "But you won't like how it ends." I hung up and sat in the quiet for a long while, the ticking of the old clock echoing in Harold's study. The conversation had gone exactly as I'd hoped. The trap was no longer invisible. Damien now knew he was inside it, but it was too late to escape. That evening, I met James to finalize the next step. "We'll release the civil claims next week," he said, sliding a folder toward me. "The fraud alerts and asset freezes are already active. Your investigator also uncovered something interesting." I leaned forward. "Tell me." "Damien's not who he says he is. Real name's Daniel Rothman. He has 2 outstanding warrants, one in Nevada, another in California, both tied to identity theft and financial fraud." I smiled slowly. "Perfect. Let's make sure the right people know where to find him." As I left the office, the air outside felt crisp and sharp. Winter had come early that year, poetic in a way, because the freeze that Damien and Claire were about to experience wasn't just financial. It was total. When I finally came face to face with them again, I didn't bring police or lawyers, just the truth. And that truth shattered what was left of their alliance. No, I didn't plan our reunion in a courtroom or an office. I wanted something smaller, quieter, a setting intimate enough that every word would cut deep. It happened 3 days after my return. Claire called me first, her voice small and brittle, like a child caught stealing. "Mom, I heard you're back." "Damien said we should meet," I finished. "Yes, I think that's a good idea. Mihian." I chose the cafe where Harold used to take me every Sunday. Neutral ground, public enough to keep them from trying anything foolish. When I arrived, they were already there, sitting together but not touching. Claire looked pale, her once glossy hair limp, her hands fidgeting with her cup. Damien looked worse, eyes shadowed, jaw tight, his usual swagger replaced by something raw. I sat down across from them. "You both look nervous," I said. "You should be, Mom, please." Claire began, voice shaking. "We made a mistake. You made a decision," I corrected. "A mistake is forgetting a birthday. Leaving your mother to die in a desert isn't a mistake. It's a choice." Damien leaned forward, his tone low and cold. "You don't understand, Evelyn. We were desperate. You hoard wealth like it's a game while we struggle. You could have helped us. I tilted my head. So you decided to help yourselves? By killing me? No one was supposed to die, Claire burst out. Her eyes filled with tears, but I could tell they were tears for herself, not for me. Damien said the car would come back. Wayfroze's Ambertius Ted. Self-Gafer is enough, he snapped. She's playing you again, Claire. Can't you see it? I smiled faintly. And you're losing control, Damien. How interesting. He glared at me. What do you want, Evelyn? You've made your point. You're alive. You won. Just leave it, I repeated softly. After everything you did, after the nights I spent listening to the wind and wondering if my body would ever be found, you don't get to dictate the ending. Claire reached out, her fingers trembling. Please, Mom, I'll do anything. I didn't mean for it to go that far. You thought love meant obedience, I said. You thought following a liar would make him love you. But tell me something, Claire. How much do you really know about your husband? She blinked. What? I turned to Damien, pulling a folded sheet of paper from my bag. Did you tell her your real name, Daniel? Or that you're wanted in Nevada and California for fraud and identity theft? His face drained of color. Where did you— Oh, I know everything, I said. Your aliases, your accounts, your victims. Did you also tell my daughter that you're still married to a woman in Seattle named Ruth Blackwood? Claire stared at him, frozen. That's not true. I slid a photo across the table. Damien and a woman in wedding clothes smiling. The date stamp on the corner said Arsène Isherbad. Claire's lips parted, but no sound came out. The betrayal hit her like a blade. Damien shot to his feet. You can't prove anything. Actually, I can, I said. And by tomorrow morning, so will the police. They're waiting for you at your apartment right now. He hesitated, eyes darting toward the door, calculating. You wouldn't, I would. And I did. He bolted, pushing past a waitress and disappearing into the street. Claire collapsed into her seat, sobbing. Mom, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. I looked at her for a long moment, then said quietly, You didn't want to know. Outside, sirens began to wail, distant at first, then closer. I didn't look back. That night, the news broke. Daniel Rothman, alias Damien Roth, arrested at the airport on multiple charges. But for Claire, the real punishment was just beginning because I wasn't finished yet. By sunrise, his face was everywhere. Conman Daniel Rothman arrested at Minneapolis Airport, accused of financial fraud and attempted murder. The headlines spread like wildfire across every local channel. They used the photo I'd anonymously sent the night before. Damien in handcuffs, eyes down, the mask finally shattered. I watched it all from my kitchen table with a cup of coffee and a strange calmness that felt almost divine. Justice was no longer a concept. It was a living thing, moving, breathing, devouring everything Damien had built. The police had caught him trying to board a flight to Brazil with a fake passport and scissors Lincoln cash. He'd tried to run one last con, selling Claire's jewelry for a quick escape. That final act of cowardice was the last nail in his coffin. By noon, I received a call from my investigator, Mr. Keller, his voice steady but pleased. They've charged him, Miss S. Whitmore, 6 counts of wire fraud, identity theft, and attempted homicide pending your statement. The FBI's involved. Now. Good, I said. Let them have him. And your daughter? She'll face her part soon enough. Because while Damien's collapse was loud and public, Claire's was slow, private, and far more painful. That evening, she appeared at my doorstep, no makeup, no smile, just a trembling shell of the woman I used to know. For a moment, I almost didn't open the door. Then curiosity won. She stood there, clutching a crumpled newspaper, the headline visible. Mom, she whispered. Mom, she whispered. It's all true, isn't it? Everything you said. Yes. She looked down at the ground, tears dropping silently. He lied to me about everything. The debts, the other women, the marriage. I didn't know. I folded my arms. You didn't ask either. I was stupid, she said, her voice breaking. I thought if I kept him happy, he'd love me. I thought we could start over after you were gone. She winced at the word. I didn't think he'd actually finish the sentence, I said coldly. Didn't think he'd actually kill me? Her knees gave out and she sank to the porch, sobbing. I was scared, Mom. I didn't know what to do. I wanted to stop him, but you didn't. She looked up, eyes swollen and red. What do I do now? For a long moment, I just watched her. The daughter I'd raised to be strong had become weak the moment greed touched her heart. And yet part of me, the part that had once cradled her as a child, couldn't help but ache. You tell the truth, I said finally. To the police, to the court, to every person you lied to. You take responsibility. It's the only way you'll ever earn a fraction of forgiveness. She nodded, shoulders shaking. I will. But even as she said it, I saw the old instinct, the desire to be pitied, to find the easy way out. And I knew that her punishment couldn't stop at confession, because the law might forgive her. I wouldn't. That night I called James again. File the disinheritance papers, I said. I want it official. Claire Whitmore receives nothing from my estate. He hesitated. Are you certain, Evelyn? She's still your daughter. Read the Surs Gisulpser Sipertumis a bit subdord the Serpersoe. No, I said solemnly. She was. Not any more. Outside my window, snow had begun to fall. Soft, slow, pure. I watched it coat the garden where Harold once planted lilies, everything new and untouched. A fitting image, I thought, because by the time the storm ended, I'd have wiped their sins clean, not through mercy, but through erasure. A week later, I walked into a courtroom where both of them sat side by side, my daughter and the man who'd left me for dead. What I revealed there would silence even the judge. The courtroom smelled faintly of old wood, paper, and tension. Reporters lined the back row, whispering like vultures, waiting for the first drop of blood. I took my seat at the front, calm and composed, my posture straight, not as a victim, but as a woman delivering her own closing argument to the universe. Across the room sat Claire, pale and trembling, and Damien, or rather, Daniel Rothman, wrists cuffed, his eyes dull and angry. The arrogance that once coated his every word was gone. What remained was the hollow stare of a man who finally realized he wasn't the hunter. He was prey. Ka. The judge, a silver-haired woman with the weariness of someone who'd seen too much deceit in her lifetime, called the room to order. We are here for preliminary sentencing on charges of financial fraud, attempted murder, and conspiracy. When the prosecutor began, I barely heard the legal details, the bank statements, the recorded calls, the testimony from the Moroccan police. It was all background music to me. What mattered was the sight of them side by side, the two people who had planned my death, now chained by the consequences of their own ambition. When it was my turn to speak, I rose slowly, every movement deliberate, every breath calculated. The courtroom hushed. 6 months ago, I began. These two people, my own daughter and her husband, left me to die in the Moroccan desert. They believed that money, not love, defined a family. They were wrong. I turned to the judge and handed over a sealed envelope. Inside it is a copy of my late husband Harold's will, the original version, never shown to them. It contains a clause that disinherits any heir who harms me or acts against our estate. And if I die under suspicious circumstances, every asset passes directly to charity. A murmur rippled through the room. Even the judge raised an eyebrow. Is this document valid? Yes, Your Honor. Signed, notarized, and filed 5 years before Harold's death. I faced Claire then. She looked like she'd been turned to stone. You see, Claire, even if you had succeeded, even if I had died out, not there in the dunes, you still would have gotten nothing. Harold made sure of that. The inheritance you tried to kill me for never existed for you. Tears streaked her face. Steshta ritmamana war. I at metern had a wording haperticum borsa wern. Tears streaked her face. Mom, please, I didn't know. That's exactly the problem, I said. You never wanted to know. You followed a liar into the desert and helped him bury your conscience beside me. Then I turned to Damien. And you, the man who called me useless, who thought an old woman couldn't fight back. I want you to remember this moment every day of your sentence. Because you didn't lose to wealth, or law, or luck, you lost to the woman you underestimated. The judge cleared her throat. Mrs. Whitmore, do you have any closing remarks before sentencing? I took a slow breath. Yes. Justice isn't revenge, Your Honor. It's clarity, and today I see clearly for the first time in years. The courtroom was silent, except for the sound of the gavel striking wood. Defendant Daniel Rothman is hereby sentenced to 9 years in federal prison for fraud, identity theft, and attempted homicide. Claire Whitmore is sentenced to 3 years for conspiracy and obstruction of justice. The sound echoed like thunder through the room. Claire wept openly. Damien stared straight ahead, his jaw tight, refusing to meet my eyes. When the bailiffs led them away, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Some goodbyes don't require words, only finality. As I walked out of the courtroom, snowflakes drifted down from the gray sky, silent, weightless, and pure. I pulled my coat tighter and whispered to myself, Harold, it's done. It's done. With justice served, everyone thought my story was over. But what no one knew was that I still had one last message to deliver, not to the courts, not to the press, but to Claire. Ifbarding. The days that followed the verdict felt strangely quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't comfort, it lingers, heavy and reflective, reminding you of everything you've lost and everything you've reclaimed. Victory would feel like triumph, like the last scene of some courtroom drama where justice bursts through the door in shining armor. But real justice is quieter. It doesn't shout, it simply balances the scales. For the first time in months, I woke up without checking my phone for updates, without waiting for another shoe to drop. The world had stopped spinning out of control. Damien was behind bars, and Claire, my daughter, was in a women's correctional facility 40 miles away. The newspapers called me the widow who outsmarted her daughter's killer. I hated that headline. It wasn't about outsmarting, it was about surviving, about refusing to let betrayal define me. James came by one afternoon carrying a thick folder of finalized documents. It's done, he said gently. Of finalized documents. It's done, he said gently. The estate is fully secured. The charities have been established as Harold intended, and the disinheritance clause is now legally permanent. I nodded. Good. Harold would have liked that. James hesitated. Evelyn, I know this has been hard. Are you sure you don't want to visit her? Claire, she's been asking for you. I looked at him for a long time before answering. You know, James, forgiveness is something people talk about like it's an act of mercy. But sometimes not forgiving is the only way to stay whole. He sighed softly. Understood. After he left, I walked into Harold's old study, the room where every part of this war had started. Sunlight fell through the window onto the same desk where he once planned our future. I ran my fingers along the grain of the wood and thought of him, his patience, his wisdom, and his unshakable faith in me. You were right, Harold, I whispered. Money shows people for who they are. That night, I opened a blank notebook and began to write, not a letter of anger or closure, just a record, a survivor's account. I wrote about the desert, about Hakeem's kindness, about the way sand can teach you patience better than time ever could. I wrote about how grief doesn't end when justice is served. It just changes shape. When I finished, I sealed the notebook in an envelope and addressed it to the Women's Rehabilitation Center. Attention, Claire Whitmore. Inside, I'd written only one final message. You once asked me what real love looks like. It isn't wealth. It isn't obedience. It's responsibility, even when it hurts. I don't hate you, Claire. I pity the part of you that let greed replace love. Learn something from this, and maybe one day you'll be worthy of forgiveness, not mine, but your own. I didn't sign it. Some words carry more weight when they come from silence. 2 weeks later, I received a short note through my attorney. It was from Claire. The handwriting was shaky, smudged by what I assumed were tears. I don't deserve to call you Mom, but I'll spend every day trying to become the person you raised me to be. Thank you for surviving and for showing me what strength really is. I read it once, folded it neatly, placed it in Harold's old cigar box. Then I locked the study door behind me, and finally, for the first time since he died, I allowed myself to cry. Not for pain, for peace. A year later, I returned to Morocco, not as a victim, but as a woman reborn. What I left behind in the dunes wasn't my weakness. It was my past. A year later, I found myself standing once again before the endless dunes of Morocco. The same horizon that had once promised death now shimmered like an invitation, golden, silent, eternal. Hakim met me near Merzouga, where the sand rolled like waves frozen in time. His hair had turned whiter, but his smile hadn't changed. I told you, madam, he said warmly, the desert doesn't forget. No, I said softly. It remembers everything. He helped me off the jeep, and we walked slowly toward the place he had found me that day, the remnants of Dat Tresank, the old ruin where I'd hidden from the sun and written my message to the world. The sand had swallowed most of it, but part of the blackened wall still stood, half buried, defiant against the wind. There, faint but visible, were the words I had scrawled in charcoal, "Kit left to die. Survive to live." I smiled. It's still here, Hakim nodded. The wind tries to erase, but some things refuse to be forgotten. I set down the small satchel I'd brought with me. Nothing grand, just a handful of lilies from my garden, my barred home. Just a handful of lilies from my garden back home and Harold's old wristwatch. I placed both near the wall, letting the wind bury them slowly. This is where I stopped being the woman everyone thought I was, I said. Harold would have called it my rebalance sheet, Hakim chuckled softly. I replied. Now I'm just living, I replied. Not for revenge, not for fear, just living. We stood there in silence for a while, watching the horizon ripple under the sun. The same sun that had nearly killed me now felt warm, almost tender, like an old enemy who'd decided to let me go. When I'd left the States, people told me I was brave for returning here. The truth was simpler. I wasn't brave. I was grateful that I'd been broken and rebuilt, grateful that I'd discovered strength buried beneath grief and betrayal. Before I left Minneapolis, I'd made sure every piece of Harold's estate was secured for good. The charities we'd chosen were thriving, a literacy fund for underprivileged women, a hospital wing named in his honor. Money, I realized, only matters when it becomes something larger than you. That was Harold's final lesson, one I'd taken too long to understand. There's some September. As for Claire, I hadn't seen her since the letter. Her parole hearing was coming soon. James said she'd changed, calmer, more introspective. Whether that was redemption or regret, I didn't know. But I hoped she'd learned what I had, that survival isn't about revenge. It's about reclaiming your own power. Hakim handed me a flask of tea, and we sat on the sand, sipping quietly as the wind began to rise. You know, he said, many who come to the desert seek forgiveness. Others come for peace. You came back for truth. Maybe I came back for all three, I said. He smiled. Then the desert did its job. The wind picked up, lifting a veil of sand that danced around us like gold dust. Somewhere beneath that surface lay the old Evelyn Whitmore, the one who trusted too easily, who believed blood always meant love. I left her there, under the dunes, where she belonged. When the sun began to dip toward the horizon, Hakeem started the jeep. I turned for one last look. The ruin was nearly gone now, swallowed by time, but I could still read the faintest trace of my writing on the wall. Left to die, survived to live, and beneath it in smaller letters that I added that day with a piece of stone. Kyo and I lived well. As we drove away, the desert faded into twilight, endless, merciless, beautiful. The kind of place that tests you, then teaches you exactly who you are. I had gone into those sands as a widow. I left them as something better, alive, free. Remembered